I'm going to start with a quote from Holy Blood, Holy Grail. The Merovingian dynasty issued from a tribe of Germanic people, collectively known as the Franks. Between the 5th and 7th centuries, the Merovingians ruled large parts of what are now France and Germany. The ruler from whom the Merovingians derived their name is the most elusive Merovee. So Merovee's mother supposedly went swimming in the ocean. In the water, she is said to have been seduced and or raped by an unidentified marine creature from beyond the sea, a beast of Neptune similar to a Quinatar, whatever a Quinatar may have been. This creature apparently impregnated the lady a second time, and when Merovee was born, there allegedly flowed in his veins a combination of two different bloods, the blood of a Frankish ruler and a mysterious aquatic creature. So when you hear stuff like that, this is all symbolic for someone getting planted by one of the reptilians. The reptilians have always tried to confuse their origin, and many people have associated them with the water. They like to be associated with the water. The Dracs, as you know, have these big bulging eyes that they look amphibious, or like a frog, like a giant frog. So many people have said there's some sort of like marine creature. When you hear about, a princess, when you hear about the old fables of like a princess going out to a swamp and encountering a talking frog, and all this stuff, this is all, of course, again, symbolic of coming in contact with the reptilians, with the Dracs and the Bephath, and getting planted. So when you hear about mer people, mermen, mermaids, that is always symbolic of the Vatican and their cult. When you hear maids, that is always coincides with the Vatican. They're maids, the people that they control. Now, in the old legends about mermaids coming in contact with people, when you hear about the stories about a mermaid changing into complete human form and meeting a handsome prince, or wanting to be with a human prince or a human man, it's basically about a woman who was in the cult, seeing a man that she liked that has nothing to do with the cult, and then her trying to be with him. But if you look through the fairy tales and the fables and everything, she only has a certain amount of time that she could stay with him, or it causes her great pain to live with him. I think one of the fairy tales that I read when I was younger said that when the mermaid would walk with human feet on the ground, it was like her stepping on like sharp rocks the whole time. It was very painful for her to be living with the prince, but she tolerated that so she could stay with him. What this is symbolic for is the person controlled by the Vatican, their planet, or their handlers making life extremely uncomfortable if they try to go in their own direction, if they try to find love, or just to be free to form a relationship with who they want to form a relationship with. Not only do the Dracs and the reptilians, but the Vatican and the CIA make this almost intolerable. And I explain how they do this using what they consider to be spells, but it's their reptilian infestations, their gray tech that is projected onto others in a form of sophisticated mind control that causes the victim pain. So they basically control people in that fashion. That's why when you hear about all the royal families, they're all controlled by the Vatican. They're all told who they could intermarry with. They're forced into that situation. And it's all kind of a sick game to the Vatican, who finds out who's pretty sadistic. It seems like the nice people tend to be victimized and controlled, while they find very sadistic maids to like just be basically whore bags. There's documents about a prince getting married to a princess, and the night of the wedding feast, these maids or these Vatican harlots seduced the prince into have sex with them and infected him with syphilis before he could even sleep with his princess. And that's what that's how the Vatican control people, and kind of like that's what they get off on. Look what we do to princes. Look what we do to the rich nobility. We could cause them to be all sorts of disgusting people, and we can manipulate them and seduce them and control them, and they're not all that. Look what we do to them. And they constantly basically just disgrace human beings by saying, even the best of you, the supposed best of you. I really don't like nobility or royal, but this is how it's been through the centuries, them controlling them. And they say, look what we could do. And they could control people in all sorts of ways to make them do all sorts of terrible things. So a more recent example is the remake of the Wicker Man movie with Nicolas Cage. I know I talked about that once before, but I want to go into a little more detail about that, what that means. But basically in that movie, it's Nicolas Cage is a cop, and his old girlfriend comes back to him. Once again, she represents a maid, a Vatican maid, and they had a kid together, and then she disappeared with the kid when the kid was young, and she goes back to her people. He didn't even hear from her. She returns to basically a plant community controlled by the Vatican on some island somewhere. Now they send her these man-hating, basically plants, these nuns from this cult send her to get the man involved in a ritual that ultimately is a sacrifice where he dies. And what she tells him is that their child is missing, she needs his help. And so he goes to this island and begins to partake in a ritual trying to find his daughter. And they all gaslight him or just play games and go out of their way to appear insane, stupid, and to try to provoke him. And they call that the fool. And more recently they call it the asshole. And basically it's their little game. That's what they get off on, like I was describing before, these games of manipulation. And if you could be manipulated and you're like a scumbag, they kind of prefer that. But if you're actually a good person that actually is trying to do the right thing, they manipulate you into the point where you're kind of getting frustrated, you kind of snap, and you get put in a position where you're at their mercy, and they end up using witchcraft spells or great tech to project lots of pain on that person. So at the end of it, you see Nicolas Cage is all screwed up. His skin is like been infected with sores, and he feels like he's burning alive. And I think that they symbolically burn him at the end, which is the Vatican has burned people at the stake physically through the centuries, and they could also burn people to death through the use of spells. And these spells isn't magic. Once again, it's them working with the alien invasion. As long as they're hurting other people, the aliens will give them power. So that lady basically represented, a mermaid, if you will, and she's controlled by, in that movie they show it's the dominant female side of the Vatican, which is a bunch of man-hating lesbians, control a bunch of younger females, and they got some stupid men, slaves around there. But there's exact opposite, also in the Vatican, the women-hating men, the homosexual men, that control all the younger homosexual men, and they're essentially the opposite of that, but they work together in that fashion. So it's very disturbed, this cult. Merfolk, fish people, sardine queens, and they basically hate people, and they get off on changing people into wretches, controlling people that will molest their children or hurt children. So you hear about these incestuous royal families. And this is a way that the Dracs and the Greys control people to disgrace the image of the Creator and ultimately devolve into Grey form. So you got the Sleeping Beauty movie coming up. And if you want to read it, I don't really want to read it. There's something called The Briar Rose. And I don't know when it was written or who it was written by, but if you find it on the internet, you might want to read that. It's kind of like a X-rated version of Sleeping Beauty. That's basically has to do with a lady from a royal family who has a Vatican handler. It has to do with satanic ritual abuse, her father raping her while the mother basically is present. There's rituals in a church. The father's friends raped this girl, and the whole time she doesn't know why. She's sleeping. She's a good person, and why does all this bad stuff happen to her? Why is she victimized by all these bad people? She's just waiting for her prince to come wake her up. So ultimately she thinks she could stay in that order or stay around those people, and someday a prince will come to her and rescue her. Well, that's how they want. They want you to sleep and dream and that sort of thing, instead of making an effort to go look for your love or make an effort to actually do something. But if you don't like where you're at, and you don't like the people that surround you, I don't blame you, and you need to get out, and you can't give up. They make it seem like it's impossible. That's another game. Whatever you do, they make it seem like it's impossible, that you can never get out. But I'm here to tell you that you can get out. And America is a country now because the founding mothers and fathers got out. This country has always been a work in progress. It was never perfect, and it's not perfect now. But it's the best country the world has ever known. And it exists because a bunch of people got out of from underneath Vatican rule that controlled the governments of the old world. So when my wife and I were broken up, when I went to jail, they made it almost the pain excruciating every time that I would go up to visit her. They would burn the hell out of me. They would make it so it feel like I couldn't breathe. Like I said, they had the electromagnetic energy oscillators installed in the car, and they would crank them up the whole time. And a lot of people, they had to pull over and get out of the car. But I just refused to. Nothing was going to keep me from my wife. So I tolerated pain to be with her, and she tolerated pain to be with me.